These birds are called double-crested cormorants. Notice the long bill, the orange face, the kinked neck? That's a DCC. These flapjacks land between the size of a crow and a goose. They proudly don brown and black feathers and peacock with the double crest of white feathers. Double-crested cormorants like to eat fish. When they're not fishing, they like to sit on the beach. Cormorants are amazing in flight. Streamlined and elegant, they have to be because they migrate every year. They're avid socialites. And they're great parents who love their kids. They're kind of like people, except they're not. They're birds. Overall, they're pretty chill. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, widespread use of DDT and other toxic pesticides inadvertently began to wipe them out, but they bounced back. Today, double-crested cormorants can be found in Alaska, Ontario, Florida, New England, Mexico, and the Bahamas. They can most commonly be found around large freshwater lakes, such as the Great Lakes. In much of their range, double-crested cormorants are extra special, mostly because fishermen and hunters don't like what they eat, where they live, or what they do. Pretty much everything about them. And they convince governments to shoot them, or let hunters do it, just for the fun of it. Wildlife management is tricky business. One might wonder why we're so compelled to manage wildlife at all, seeing as we're the ones who messed it all up in the first place, but that's for another video. Cormorants are killed all over the place, including Ontario, under the guise of protecting fish and natural habitat. In Ontario, during the 106-day fall cormorant season, hunters may shoot up to 15 birds a day. That's 1,590 birds per hunter. What's weird is that there are no limits or targets set for how much of the cormorant population can be killed. There's also no requirement to report the numbers being killed. And more importantly, there is no science to support the idea that they need to be killed in the first place. Yeah, there's something fishy going on with this one. Government-sanctioned killing typically comes with a few rules. For example, the animals being removed ought to fit a certain criteria so as not to diminish the survival of the species. For instance, big game deer hunting can only target certain animals at specific times, so as not to endanger the full life potential of their babies. Moreover, they are supposed to rely on science-based evidence when they make their decisions about who to kill. Aren't crack teams of scientists and top men dispatched to study the landscape and determine exactly the thresholds for wildlife conservancy? Oh, apparently not. In Ontario's case, no specifics are established for which birds should or shouldn't be hunted, nor are there any targets. Are we looking to see a 10% decrease of cormorants, 20%, 100%? We just don't know. 15 birds a day means that even if a tiny fraction of Ontario's hunters decided to shoot the maximum allotted birds, they'd be able to wipe out most of the cormorants in the province. It's also worth noting that double-crested cormorants are inedible. No one shoots them to eat them. They're not game birds, so fall harvest might be a tad bit of a euphemism. So what's going on here? Why is it open season to shoot cormorants? What is the scientific argument for removing these birds? Who exactly is pushing for this hunt? Let's dive in deeper, shall we? Ontario government says, quote, "We've heard concerns from property owners, hunters and anglers, and commercial fishers about the kind of damage cormorants cause to their communities. So we're taking steps to help them deal with any local issues." Okay, so let's dig into some of these concerns. The most vocal group of anti-cormorantites appears to be extremists in the hunting and fishing communities. Apparently, cormorants cause so much damage that we have to wipe them out. Let's not gloss over the fact that cormorants were here first, but hey, we're here to look into the validity of these complaints. So, complaint: cormorants destroy the environment. No. Cormorants are eco-engineers that modify, maintain, and create habitat, just like beavers and elephants do, but they're birds. Like most water birds, they nest in groups near the water. Their excrement, called guano, can build up under nesting areas. This often causes a change in the vegetation, and it's an entirely normal cycle of life that's seen all around the world where colonial waterbirds congregate. And since cormorants primarily nest on a small number of islands and headlands away from human neighbors, the amount of land that they eco-engineer is super tiny. People are making a mountain out of a cormorant molehill. That's terrible. Complaint: cormorants are eating all the sport fish. Cormorants eat primarily smaller non-native fish species. Studies of the diet of double-crested cormorants in the Great Lakes shows that they eat relatively low sport fish numbers. They They rely heavily on a diet of round gobies and alewives, which are actually invasive species. So why isn't this a good news story to have a native species of bird eating invasive species of fish? Oh right, the anglers want to keep the invasive fish in the lakes to feed the fish that they want to catch. Oh, and let's not forget, the number of predators in an ecosystem is controlled by the availability of their prey. If fish numbers are diminishing, the numbers of cormorants should deplete accordingly, but that simply isn't the case. Complaint: cormorants drive away other species of birds. Cormorants may actually do the opposite and actually attract birds to wherever they live. In fact, herons, pelicans, gulls, and other water birds are routinely seen around larger mixed colonies with cormorants. More birds means more eyes to watch for danger, so that proves additional protection for all the birds in the colony. It seems to be only fishermen that don't like having cormorants as neighbors. Complaint: cormorants are negatively impacting the monarch butterfly staging areas. No, they're not. Complaint: the number of cormorants continues to increase year over year. No. The entire cormorant population isn't large at all. In Ontario, it's estimated at only 145,000 birds. The numbers fluctuate up and down, but that's a pretty small number, especially when some people claim they're causing super catastrophic, crazy big damage to the ecology. These aren't a bunch of level 50 Charizards flying around. Complaint: cormorants pollute the water. The largest cormorant colony in the Great Lakes is adjacent to several popular beaches where children and adults swim in the summer months. The water at these beaches is regularly tested and found to be safe for swimming. Oh, and good for fishing too. Complaint: cormorants are threatening endangered Lake Erie water snakes. Look, I think whacking day kills more snakes. The truth is, there's never been a recorded instance of cormorants predating on them. As well, significant populations of snakes live on islands where the cormorants are populous. In fact, a letter signed by 51 scientists recommended against cormorant hunting in Ontario, noting that there was no scientific basis for reducing the number of cormorants in the province, nor evidence to support the claims used to support the hunt. So why aren't governments, like the Ontario government, listening? While many governments promote and carry out selective kills called cormorant culls, the primary proponents of cormorant hunting are members of the angling and hunting community. Some of them have been pushing for a drastic reduction in cormorant numbers for many years. Their baseless arguments about cormorants causing massive damage and decimating sportfish numbers often don't consider the bigger picture. Human development, climate change, water temperature fluctuations, invasive species, pollution, and of course, overfishing. So many things can factor into the systemic shifts we see in wildlife. While anglers and hunters may see the cormorants as competition, they haven't produced very much evidence to support their argument that cormorants are decimating fish populations. It's just something to say because they see fish numbers changing and the cormorants are around, and so they connect the two. Unfortunately, governments seem to value special interest groups and lobbyists over scientists. In Ontario, this strange, vague, unrestricted, and mostly unregulated hunt seems to be a political reaction to a vocal minority. However, public sentiment can, as it should, convince governments to change policy. We know Ontario has some awful wildlife laws, and so do many other places, so it's high time that we all made some noise about it. Cormorants, like everyone else, deserve the right to live and thrive. Sure, they smell like fish, but that's no reason for the heartless target practice style hunt that's happening in Ontario and elsewhere. I think most compassionate people would agree with that. Just because someone doesn't like cormorants eating some fish, or them pooping over plants, or they haven't bothered to read the science that proves that what they're thinking is wrong, violently shooting the birds with guns, disrupting other birds and ecosystems they inhabit, and putting members of the public in danger is kind of nuts. This is not the way. People concerned about wildlife and public safety should speak out against the wanton and senseless killing of cormorants. Use the hashtag SaveTheGLC or go to thegreatlakescormorants.com to help raise awareness about this weird, archaic, and pretty stupid killing. And let's set a new standard for living with wildlife.